What causes sexual and romantic attraction? Hi, I'm Andrew Rodriguez, and welcome to Psycho Bible, babbling about psychology and theology. In today's video, let's dive deeper into the basic elements or essences of love: attraction, desire, and goodwill. In Love and Responsibility, Pope John Paul II, then Karol Wojtyla, continues by exploring the sexual urge. See, in our physical being, we have sexual urges and instincts. Surprise, surprise. But as beings that are more than physical, we have the capacity to transcend our urges and develop self-mastery. So we're not just subject to our sexual urges, especially when we realize that acting on every urge usually involves a violation of another person's freedom and dignity. For example, if you would be a rapist if you just went and acted on every sexual thought or urge that popped in your head as you saw attractive women. And honestly, always acting on your sexual urges violates your own freedom, as it puts you in bondage to your carnal cravings. It would make you no different than an animal, just running off of instincts. As Christopher West puts it, if you can never say no to your sexual urges, then your yes means nothing. So, the sexual urge must be subjugated, submitted to the ethical principle of love, willing the good of the other. Now, every human is a sexual being. Just by the very nature of being human, we are a sexually dimorphic species, and we reproduce by the union of two opposite sexes. Sorry, asexuals, you may have a low sex drive, but you're still a sexual being, and that's a good thing. You're not actually asexual. You don't reproduce without union of the sexes. So, in the normal course of development, we recognize that the opposite, complementary sex possesses what we do not have in order to make a new whole. In the sexual union, it's as if we become a new organism. In Hebrew, the word is echad, one in essence. Just as God is multiple persons, one in essence, so the marital union is of different persons who are forming a new entity, a new union in essence. This awareness of difference and awareness of the goodness of the difference is what stirs up attraction. As Wojtyla says in Love and Responsibility on page 48, sexual attraction makes obvious the fact that the attributes of the two sexes are complementary, so that a man and a woman can complete each other. The urge to mutual completion which accompanies this division indicates that the attributes of each sex possess some specific value for the other." Unquote. Side note, when we speak of completing each other, we mean the completion of the new union that only the two sexes, with their complementary physical and psychological attributes, can make. I'm not speaking of being incomplete as a person and therefore needing a partner. If you're marrying or hooking up with people because you believe you're incomplete as an individual, you need to stop and work on better integrating yourself and receiving wholeness and healing from your Maker. The prerequisite to a marital union is that you be whole as an individual, or at least whole enough. We all have some degree of brokenness or insecurity, some weakness that we're continually working through until the new heavens and new earth, until we're made fully redeemed. So, in marriage, you have one whole man plus one whole woman makes a whole new organism in marriage. This is something my old high school psychology teacher taught us, that a healthy relationship is like an H. Two people, stable in their identities, now connected. Whereas an anti-healthy relationship would be like two people leaning on each other for their identity, and then they're also connected. So what happens when one person pulls away, or they leave, or they start becoming more independent? The other one collapses. Or they keep leaning on each other so hard it pushes them down. So the prerequisite is stability in your identity, at least stability enough. in healthy, integrated sexuality, you're not attracted merely to the traits of the other person, you're attracted to the person. As Wojtyla says, inevitably then, the sexual urge in a human being is always in the natural course of things directed towards another human being. This is the normal form which it takes. If it is directed towards the sexual attributes as such, this must be recognized as an impoverishment or even a perversion of the urge. If it is directed towards the sexual attributes of a person of the same sex, we speak of a homosexual deviation, unquote. Let alone if it's directed toward the sexual attributes of an animal or the non-sexual attributes of a robot or some inanimate object. It's just evident more and more as we've become more disintegrated and we don't understand the meaning of our sexuality and what it means to be a person. A person meaning that you are both a physical being and a spiritual being composite. That we have divided what it means to be sexual into just whatever brings you pleasure, whatever makes you feel good. Well, a sex robot can bring you pleasure, and for some people, even something inanimate like their car can bring them pleasure in some sort of twisted, deviant way. So you must understand that an attraction or a sexual attraction toward anything or animal or other person for whom you're not actually designed to be complementary with is a deviation from your design. And for you to indulge and follow through with that desire will ultimately be for your ill. Wojtyla continues, quote, "The natural direction of the sexual urge is towards a human being of the other sex and not merely towards the other sex as such." Meaning, you're not just attracted to all members of the opposite sex. He continues, "It is just because it is directed towards a particular human being that the sexual urge can provide the framework within which and the basis on which the possibility of love arises." And love is not just crystallization of the physical or psychological aspects of the sexual urge. Love may grow out of the sexual urge, but it's given shape by acts of will at the level of the person. Wojtyla says that in every type of love, there is attraction and goodwill. And he adds desire as another essence of love. Each of these may seem like love on their own, but they are actually the building blocks of love. Attraction is a result of the sexual urge described earlier. To attract someone essentially means to be regarded as a good. Now, obviously, attraction is not purely cognitive. I'm not just thinking, oh, you are a good of some sort. No, obviously, it has an emotional and a willful component. Therefore, if we have any sort of deviation or perversion in our sexual urges, we must work at realigning our thoughts, feelings, and behaviors with God's design and intent. Now, we typically experience attraction as an emotion. The emotions of attraction are awakened by sensing particular values in the object of attraction. Attraction is one of the essential aspects of love as a whole. It is not love itself. Now, when we have a sexual attraction to only a certain aspect of a person or toward some other object, then we have the makings not of love, but of a fetish. Just to believe that you are meant to function sexually and to be attracted sexually towards something with which you're not actually designed to sexually function, that's a fetish by definition. So consider that definition and broaden it to think of some applications. The truth is, we are designed to love full persons, not just particular attributes. An integrated person loves fully and gives of oneself fully. Nevertheless, what draws us towards certain persons are the certain values they possess. An attraction to another depends not just on the person having the value, but on the subject's, your sensitivity to that value. This dovetails well with certain therapeutic approaches that recognize unconscious motivations, such as imago couples counseling, or other psychodynamic approaches like object relations or internal family systems. The concepts in those therapeutic approaches is that growing up, we develop templates of the type of persons that attract us because they possess the qualities or patterns that remind us of the ways we felt loved early in life. But the rub is that we also tend to be attracted to how they represent the ways we were not loved, the ways we needed or greatly desired when growing up, thus creating a particular sensitivity to those values. If we're not aware of that, it can lead to some very toxic dynamics in our relationships. I'll do more on that in a future video, but you can think of an example, like the girl who didn't have a dad who was present, who didn't show her much affection, and so she keeps going after guys who use her sexually but don't really see her needs and meet her needs. This is an age-old example of daddy issues. So that's a very obvious example that you can apply to a whole bunch of other situations. But regarding the positive end, Wojtyla speaks of developing a sense impression of certain values that get imprinted. Sense impression is a general term for the content of any sensory reaction to objective stimuli. It must be something concrete, like an image. Okay, so for example, guys may have a sense impression of a woman's figure, her breasts, her eyes, her hair. And we may have such sense impressions going back to early ages so that they imprint deeply into our memory. Literally, a sense impression is an impression left by what your senses pick up, meaning what you see, what you hear, what you touch and feel. So all that data from your senses comes in and leaves an impression. So a certain guy that you notice catches your attention, leaves a sense impression. Now, our emotions are separate and distinct from sense impressions. As Wojtyla says, in the content of an impression, what is reflected is the image of an object. Okay, in other words, a person, attributes of a person, or something else entirely. All right. Whereas in an emotion, we are reacting to a value which we find in that object. Unquote. So, a sense impression is a reaction to content. Emotion is a reaction to value. When the object is a spiritual immaterial value, the emotional reaction is deeper. When an impression and emotion are linked, their object is more distinctly stamped on one's consciousness. So let me give an example. Jane meets John. Jane sees that John is already a father from a previous relationship. All right, so there's a sense impression. Here he is, he's a dad. She has a strong emotional reaction to that because she values finding a man who would be a good father. Now, why is that? Because she grew up with a father who was abusive and neglectful, and she always longed for that. So she has a deepened sensitivity to that value. So when she sees John, she just assumes he's going to be a great dad to our children as well. And you know what? He'll probably be a really great husband too. Okay? And so she has such a strong emotional reaction that if she lets that emotion carry her, she'll just jump into the relationship right away and assume that he's going to meet her needs of being a good father to her future kids with him and maybe be a great husband to her. When we are curious about our attractions, we discover that they reveal how we believe the object of our attractions, the other person, is a good. Feelings arise spontaneously. The attraction which one person feels toward another often begins suddenly and unexpectedly, but this reaction is in effect blind. Where the feelings are functioning naturally, they are not concerned with the truth about their object. The truth is for a man a function and a task for his reason. For example, with Jane, that sense impression she had of John being a father and the emotional reaction to it could be so powerful, it overtakes her that she doesn't actually pause and wait and let her reason then get involved to see, well, actually, is there evidence that he's a really great father and that he will have good boundaries and also meet my needs and prioritize me and actually be there for me in the way I would need him to be? Or am I just jumping to conclusions because of that emotional reaction to that sense impression? So as Wojtyla would say, this is just where emotional affective reactions often lead to distort or falsify attractions. Through their prism, values which are not really present at all may be discerned in a person. This can be very dangerous to love. For if you get disillusioned, the love can turn to hate. Put another way, that which you idolize, and that which you idolize, you eventually demonize. Because you will realize that this false idol cannot ultimately live up to your ideals and fulfill you, and so you resent it. This is why the truth about the other person is so important in any attraction, and why love cannot be reduced to feelings or the genuineness of feelings. Like, well, how do you know you really love? Well, it just feels so genuine. It feels real. Of course something can feel real, but feelings belong in the passenger seat, not the driver's seat of your life. They inform you of your intuitions and deeper dynamics. Yes, that's great. But the wise mind consults both the emotion and reason in making decisions about anything, especially sex, love, and relationships. Me having euphoric feelings about some girl I just started dating, or if you're a girl just having some euphoric feelings about this guy you met, isn't reason enough to then give yourself fully to them in sex. Ultimately, it boils down to the will, and that we have a choice with what we do with the sense impression. For example, when I first met the woman who became my wife, I definitely had a sense impression and an emotional reaction. I saw her, she's gorgeous. She is physically beautiful. And she seemed really fun. So I had positive feelings for her right away. But I knew that that is not enough to make a relationship work. So I had to actually sort of tell my emotions to take a back seat even, not just a passenger seat. And I had to use my reason to evaluate, would this be the right relationship to enter into? And I had to consult God and consult friends and some family members and get to know her more. So we became friends for several months before I finally made a decision to pursue her. And it's interesting, the more I've known my wife, the true her, not just my impression of her, but known her deeply, the more my physical attraction to her has increased. So now here we are 15 years into marriage, and she is even more beautiful to me than the day we met. She as well was doing something similar when we were just friends. I didn't know it, but at that time she was also praying for me, praying that God, may he find the right person for him. We were both praying a similar prayer, that she would have whoever would be the best match for her. I just pray that, God, I want the best for her, whether or not it's with me or someone else. Though I did say, I sure hope it's with me. but I had to be willing to sacrifice what my desires, my cravings are, in order to will the good for her. So here's where we need the other element of love, goodwill. Remember our definition. To love is to will the good of the other. So I love what Karol Wojtyla says here in this section. Quote, the potential inherent in the person is most fully actualized through love. The person finds in love the greatest possible fullness of being, of objective existence. Love is an activity, a deed which develops the existence of the person to its fullest. It must, of course, be genuine love. What does this mean? A genuine love is one in which the true essence of love is realized. A love which is directed to a genuine, not merely an apparent, good in the true way, or in other words, the way appropriate to the nature of that good." Unquote. So we see here that genuine love perfects life and expands the other's existence. It's fruitful. That's exactly how God loves us. His love brings life to the full, eternal. False love is either directed toward a false good or a genuine good, but in a way that is contrary to the nature of the good. Therefore, a false love is an evil love. Here are some examples. You may greatly desire to do good for a friend, but you lack boundaries and lose your identity and take on what is your friend's responsibilities. And that way you're not actually doing them any good because they're not developing strengths that they need. And you're actually hurting yourself, whom you should also love properly. Or, another example, you delight in a same-sex friend. You have genuine warmth and affection. But then you express that love through sexualization, rather than loving your friend as a friend, in accordance with nature. Or you're dating and you have a strong bond with your girlfriend and desire to provide for her, but you move in together before there is the proper covenant of marriage to demonstrate your full commitment to her, no matter what comes in life. I'm sure you can think of more and more examples of how we express love in a way that is not in accordance with the actual good of the other, as well as good of yourself, because we also desire reciprocity for it to be an actual loving relationship, not just a one-sided or codependent relationship. See, love is evil or incomplete if it goes no further than attraction or desire for union. Hence why the whole term "love is love" is just stupid, because it's one, it's a circular definition, but two, not every love is the same. Some loves can actually be evil or distortions or incomplete. It's insufficient to long for a person as a good. Above all, you must long for that person's good. And that means to long that they fully actualize God's design and intent for them. If we do not apply agape love, sacrificing something we treasure in service of what is actually true and good for both of us, then eros, the longing for union, will be selfish and destructive to both the other person and yourself. In this sense, agape perfects eros. This is precisely why Jesus came to earth, to restore agape to eros. This is demonstrated in his first miracle in his ministry, the wedding feast at Cana, turning the water into wine. So we're at a wedding. There's eros, union. But there was no wine. Wine is always symbolic of blood, of his shedding of his blood, the blood of the grape, and represents his own blood. We see this obviously in the Last Supper when he says, "This is my blood given to you." So we see there, turning the water into wine is a reflection of how he sheds his blood to restore agape, his self-sacrifice, to our union. Not just the union of man and woman, but to the ultimate union that we're called to, the union of all of humanity to God as his bride. Just look at the modern sexual revolution to observe how eros run amok brings destruction. God placed eros, the longing for union, within us to propel us to seek eternal fulfillment in him. He gave us marriage with sexuality, both the function and sensual pleasure of it, to be a sign of that destiny. But when we direct that longing for the infinite toward the finite things of this earth, it erupts in sexual chaos. This has been the story throughout history. So Jesus came sacrificed himself so our eros would be directed toward its proper purpose. Now, as we come to a close, I don't need to even bring up a scripture to tell you this truth. We all want to be loved. And that doesn't just mean that we want someone to do good things for us. We long to be recognized as a good, to be seen as valuable just for being. We long to be delighted in. And God's sacrificial love for us was not obligatory. God doesn't begrudgingly love us. Us, those who were his enemies at worst, rebellious children at best, or wayward wives. He loves us with agape love, sacrificial, self-giving love, because he also loves us with eros love, a passionate desire to unite with us. Or, to use the Hebrew words, he shows us hesed, his loving kindness that restores and redeems us, because he has ahab love for us. He delights in us, in you, and desires union with us, with you. I pray you get to know that deep down. Think about the implication. This explains how God can still love his enemies. Even in our sin, our wickedness, and rebellion, he sees enough value in us to delight in us and desire to cleanse us and redeem us from our sin and make us his bride. This allows us to better understand how we're to love others. When we acquire the mind of Christ, when we can view people through God's eyes, then we can love even the most difficult people in our lives. Or we can love those in whom we actually do delight in ways that are difficult for our fleshly desires. And that's what we'll get into next time, desire. For now, I hope this video got your gears turning. Thinking about the nature and cause of attraction, consider how it relates to topics like unwanted sexual attractions and behaviors. So, for more content like this, don't forget to subscribe and hit that bell for notifications. And please, like, comment, and share so we can get this message in front of more people. People who desperately need to know that Jesus loves us, loves you, freely, fully, faithfully, and fruitfully.